Namaskar. A warm welcome to the World News and Indian Perspective on Akashvani. This is Aditi Lumba bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches Hiroshima in Japan to attend G7 summit. Japan expresses keen interest in joining India's Unified Payments Interface UPI system. India hands over humanitarian assistance and disaster relief material to Cyclone Mocha hit Myanmar. Reserve Bank of India to withdraw 2,000 rupee notes from circulation to remain as legal tender. India says it is developing mitigation programs to reduce risk of losses from all hazards. And in Italian Open tennis, Ukraine's Helena Kalinina enters women's singles final, beating Russia's Veronika Kudermetova in the semi-final by 7-5, 5-7, 6-2 in Rome. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reached Hiroshima in Japan to attend the G7 summit at the invitation of Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. He embarked on a three-nation tour of Japan, Papua New Guinea and Australia on Friday morning. The G7 summit has chosen several key priorities for the current presidency. The broad terms of G7 summit preferences include nuclear disarmament, economic resilience and security, regional issues, climate and energy, food and health and development. There are other priorities also such as digitization and science and technology, which will be highlighted during several sessions at the summit. India's participation at the summit in Hiroshima would be structured around three formal sessions. Two sessions would be held on Saturday and the third one will be held on the 21st of May. The first session relates to food, health, development and gender equality. The second session is on climate, energy and environment, and the third session is titled Towards Peaceful, Stable and Prosperous World. On the sidelines of the G7 summit, Prime Minister Modi will hold bilateral discussions with several leaders of G7. Japan has also invited Australia, Brazil, Comoros, Cook Islands, Indonesia, South Korea and Vietnam, and some of the international organizations including the UN. Prime Minister will also hold bilateral meetings with his Japanese counterpart and unveil a bust of Mahatma Gandhi in Hiroshima. A Quad leaders meeting is being planned in Hiroshima with leaders of all the Quad nations. Our correspondent reports that India's regular participation at the G7 summits clearly points to increasing recognition that India should be a part of any serious effort to resolve global challenges, including those of peace, security, development and environment preservation. Briefing the media in New Delhi on Thursday, Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra said on the second leg of his visit, the Prime Minister will reach Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea on Sunday evening.
We are also planning a Quad leaders meeting in Hiroshima with Prime Minister Kishida, President of the US, Prime Minister of Australia, and of course our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. After Japan, for the second leg of his three-country visit, Honorable Prime Minister will visit Papua New Guinea, which will include 1. The organization and the co-chairing of the third Forum for India-Pacific Island Cooperation Summit on 22 May and also some of the bilateral meetings.
Prime Minister Modi will travel to Sydney in Australia on Monday. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida welcomed the G7 leaders in Hiroshima ahead of the commencement of the summit. The leaders laid wreaths at the Peace Memorial Park and planted saplings there. Prime Minister Kishida, European Council President Charles Michel, US President Joe Biden, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, French President Emmanuel Macron, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also posed for the picture. Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park is the only structure left standing in the area, depicting the aftermath where the world's first atomic bomb was dropped on the city on 6th of August 1945. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on G7 summit and significance of Prime Minister's visit to Japan, Papua New Guinea and Australia. In conversation are experts Anil Vadva, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, senior journalist.
This is Akashvani. Now we bring a discussion on G7 summit and significance of Prime Minister's visit to Japan, Papua New Guinea and Australia. The participants are Anil Wadhwa, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, senior journalist.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is traveling to Hiroshima, Japan today to participate in the G7, the group of 7 most developed nations in the world, the G7 summit outreach, to which India has been invited as a guest country. This would be the first leg of the Prime Minister's 3-country visit. The G7 this time has chosen several key priorities as summit preferences in particular regarding their outreach with the invited guest countries. Among these is, of course, nuclear disarmament, which is extremely crucial as far as Japan is concerned, being the only country ever to have been at the receiving end of a nuclear weapon. The others are in economic resilience and economic security, regional issues, climate and energy issues, food security, and health and development. Ambassador Anil Wadhwa joins us to provide a perspective on why this visit and the meetings that the Prime Minister is scheduled to hold are so important. Good evening, Ambassador Wadhwa. Why is the Prime Minister's presence at the G7 summit outreach meeting so important?
I think this whole visit, first to the G7 summit and then after that to Papua New Guinea for a bilateral and the FIPIC summit, plus a bilateral with Australia there. If you take it all together, I think over these 6 days that the Prime Minister is away, he is going to be having around 40 engagements and is going to interact with over 24 world leaders in summits as well as bilateral meetings in this tour. That itself is something which is extremely important. And also we are expecting several deliverables out of the Quad summit this time in Hiroshima. Obviously the Quad summit was supposed to happen in Australia, but it's been shifted now to Hiroshima. Yet the deliverables remain, and we expect an important deliverable on cybersecurity between the Quad leaders to come out of this summit in particular. Now, of course, India is the current president of the G20. Japan is the current chair of the G7 grouping of advanced economies. And we've seen March when Prime Minister Kishida was in India, he brought up the challenges before the global south, the issues which face them, and also how Japan and India could coordinate this particular agenda item to be discussed at both G20 as well as G7, and how there could be a comprehensive tackling of issues which confront the global south. So Prime Minister's visit to the G7 summit, his presence there, is obviously looked at with great expectation, where he is expected to talk about the global challenges such as food, fertilizer and energy security in particular, because these are what affect the global south the most. And besides that, India is also participating in 3 sessions of the summit. And the first is on food, health, development and gender equality. Second will focus on issues pertaining to climate, energy, environment. And the third on peaceful, stable and a prosperous world. So in all these, India has a lot to say, a lot to contribute. The G20 process, which is on in India nowadays, has provided enough material and enough consensus for India to talk about these issues in the context of G7 and to see how the G7 leaders can take these consensus views of much larger community of nations into account when they discuss their own communique. Of course, the agenda, which is for the G7, which you spelled out very clearly, which includes nuclear disarmament, so close to the heart of Japan, but also, most importantly, developments in the Indo-Pacific region and how they can advance their vision for a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. In particular, Japan will be emphasizing on a common position in terms of the aggression of China in the Taiwan Straits, and the issue of Taiwan in particular, where some of the G7 leaders have differing views. So Japan will be trying hard to bridge those gaps and to bring about a consensus and views on this particular issue.
So there will also be clearly a lot of issues that the Prime Minister will not only be able to bring back to further elaborate on during the Indian G20 presidency, but there will also be certain perspectives which he will be able to offer to the G7 summiteers, depending on all of these aspects that you have spoken about, because each of them is something, as you rightly said, affect the global south very, very strongly. So, having clear supply chains going, food security, energy security, all of these issues, obviously in the context of what has happened in Ukraine, these things also likely to be coming up. The Ukraine war and the sort of stalemate situation that is emerging from there, causing so many problems globally.
Yes, the Ukraine conflict will definitely figure in a very big way as far as the G7 is concerned. This is an issue quite close to the heart of G7 countries in particular. All of them are concerned about it, and therefore it will occupy center stage along with the other issues that we have just spoken about. And of course, besides the free and open Indo-Pacific, Japan will be in particular very keen to explore the possibility of averting a similar situation in the Indo-Pacific by way of Chinese aggression vis-a-vis Taiwan. And we'll talk about the issue about what happens and how the G7 will respond if such a situation arises in the context of Taiwan. The problem of Ukraine and the future between the Europe and the G7 in particular will figure quite prominently during the discussions.
After Japan, for the second leg of his three-country visit, the Prime Minister will be visiting Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, and which will, other than the bilateral aspect, also be, he will be co-chairing the third forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation, or the FIPIC Summit, which, given the state of climate change and given how badly affected these island nations of the Pacific are, is not only very timely, but it is also, some of the outcomes are likely to be very, very significant. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, I think the FIPIC summit comes after a gap because the first two summits were held in 2014 and 2015 in Fiji and in Jaipur. And after that, we've had a gap. But meanwhile, there have been a number of issues that India has been discussing bilaterally with the FIPIC countries. And here, India has not done too badly because we made consistent headway. In particular, what is important for the Pacific Island states is the issue of climate change. And it seems to be an existential crisis because of the sweeping rise of the sea as far as these islands are concerned. They badly need mitigation, climate mitigation. They need the means to cope with such challenges. And they also require considerable amount of help with expertise in many other fields of development. And it is here that the FIPIC summit becomes important. The fact that all 14 heads of state of the FIPIC island countries have agreed to join this meeting, the invitation of Prime Minister Modi, is very significant. Besides, it's a venue which is Papua New Guinea is also very significant. Papua New Guinea itself has been wooed a lot by the Chinese over the past few years and has made quite a bit of headway as far as Papua New Guinea is concerned, because when President Xi Jinping met Prime Minister Mahathir in Bangkok last year, he pursued a number of projects, quality belt and road cooperation to fields of agriculture, forestry, fisheries infrastructure, the special economic zones, disaster preparedness and mitigation, and green development. And all these areas are also those in which India has an interest and has a capability. But more importantly, India has an interest in the security relationship with Papua New Guinea. It has an interest in economic cooperation. Papua New Guinea is a country rich in minerals like gold and copper. India would like to cooperate with Papua New Guinea in agriculture and digital technologies in particular. And there is going to be a credit line which will be offered to Papua New Guinea during this visit, which will help take this relationship forward. But overall, I think the FIPIC island countries will be looking at development in terms of the livelihood issues, besides the climate change issues, and they will also look to India to provide the necessary wherewithal and the appropriate technologies, as I call it, in this regard.
You were listening to a discussion on G7 summit and significance of Prime Minister's visit to Japan, Papua New Guinea and Australia. The participants were Anil Wadhwa, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, senior journalist.
This is Akashvani giving you the world news. Welcome back. Japan has expressed keen interest in joining India's Unified Payments Interface UPI system. In an interview with the media channel, Japanese Digital Minister Kono Taro highlighted the ongoing digital cooperation between the two countries. He said this move aims to enhance interoperability and mutual recognition of eIDs. Responding to Mr. Taro's statement, Electronics and IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav expressed gratitude for the recognition of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Digital India vision. Mr. Vaishnav added that the vision has gained traction globally and the people understood how it was democratize digital technology. India has handed over humanitarian assistance and disaster relief material to Myanmar, which was ravaged by Cyclone Mocha on May 14th. Ambassador Vinay Kumar handed over the relief material to the people affected by the Cyclone Mocha to Yangon Region Chief Minister on Thursday under Operation Karuna. The relief material bought by INS Shivalik, INS Kamorta and INS Savitri included food items, tents, portable generators, clothes, water pumps, medicines, tarpaulins, hygiene and sanitary items, wheelchairs, face masks, etc. Another ship, INS Gharial, with emergency materials and medical kits will be arriving shortly. The materials are being sent immediately to Rakhine State for distribution among the affected communities. The Reserve Bank of India has decided to withdraw 2,000 rupees denomination banknotes from circulation. RBI has said members of the public may deposit 2,000 rupee banknotes into their bank accounts or exchange them into banknotes of other denominations at any bank branch. The 2,000 rupees notes, however, will continue to be legal tender. In a statement released on Friday, the central bank stated that in pursuance of the clean note policy of the Reserve Bank of India, it has decided to withdraw the 2,000 rupees denomination banknotes from circulation. The central bank added that in order to ensure operational convenience and to avoid disruption of regular activities of bank branches, exchange of 2,000 rupees banknotes into banknotes of other denominations can be made up to a limit of 20,000 rupees at a time at any bank starting from 23rd of May 2023. Additionally, the facility for exchange of 2,000 rupees banknotes up to the limit of 20,000 rupees at a time will be provided at the 19 regional offices of the RBI having issue departments from 23rd of May. The RBI has added that in order to complete the exercise in a time-bound manner and to provide adequate time to the members of public, all banks shall provide deposit or exchange facility for 2,000 rupees banknotes until September 30th, 2023. Union Minister of State for Science and Technology, Dr. Jitendra Singh, has emphasized on the importance of collaboration in science, technology and innovation among countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. Virtually addressing the 7th session of the heads of ministries and agencies of science and technology of SCO member states, Dr. Singh expressed India's readiness to work closely with other member countries in addressing emerging challenges. He highlighted the shared challenges faced by SCO nations such as food security, climate change, healthcare and energy access, and emphasized the need for joint efforts in finding affordable scientific solutions. External Affairs Ministry has said that it is in regular touch with U.S. authorities to ensure that there is speedy and early extradition of 26/11 Mumbai terror attack accused Tahavvur Rana. Replying to media queries in New Delhi, Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra said a judgment was given by the local U.S. court there on the matter. He added that conversation of India with U.S. side is continuing. On the upgradation of the current framework agreement that India has with Australia, the Foreign Secretary said that discussions on broad-basing trade, investment and other elements of economic partnership between India and Australia is an ongoing discussion. He said the end objective is to upscale and upgrade the current framework of partnership into a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. India's National Investigation Agency, NIA, arrested 2 wanted close associates of Canada-based listed terrorists Arsh Dhalla when they arrived at the Indira Gandhi International Airport from Manila, Philippines. The duo, identified as Amritpal Singh alias Ami and Amrit Singh, both hailing from Punjab, were nabbed by NIA in an operation on Friday morning. The accused had non-bailable arrest warrants issued against them by the NIA Delhi court in a case related to the unlawful and violent activities of banned organizations in India. They also have several criminal cases registered against them in Punjab. NIA had registered a suo motu case on 20th August last year under various sections of IPC and Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. India told the UN General Assembly that it is developing ambitious mitigation programs to reduce the risk of losses from all hazards. Principal Secretary to Prime Minister P.K. Mishra said India accord high importance to disaster risk reduction issues. Mr. Mishra was speaking at the Risk Reduction Hub event during the high-level meeting of the Mid-Term Review of Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030 that is taking place at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
In just over a decade, we have been able to reduce the loss of lives from cyclones to less than 2%. We are now developing ambitious mitigation programs to reduce the risk of losses from all hazards: landslides, glacial lake outburst floods, earthquakes, forest fire, heat waves, and lightning. In India, we accord high importance to disaster risk reduction issues. It is a central public policy issue. We have significantly increased funding earmarked for disaster risk reduction.
The United Kingdom has announced ban on Russian diamonds alongside the military-industrial complex and metals in fresh round of sanctions ahead of G7 meeting in Japan. In a statement, UK government said the ban has also been announced on imports of Russian-origin copper, aluminium and nickel. Along with these trade sanctions, the UK also is preparing to target an additional 86 members of Russia's military-industrial complex, as well as those engaged in vital industries including energy, metals and shipping. The statement said as the UK continues to engage with G7 allies to address all types of sanctions circumvention, they also include those who actively help the Kremlin in its efforts to weaken the impact of current sanctions. In a major move aimed at enhancing cooperation between the Indian Navy and the Royal Saudi Naval Force, cadets from the latter are in India for 24 days of float of training. 55 cadets from the King Fahd Naval Academy, Saudi Arabia, arrived this week in Kochi, the headquarters of India's Southern Naval Command, as part of their first ever training with the Indian Navy. 55 cadets, along with 5 directing staff from King Fahd Naval Academy, Saudi Arabia, arrived on board 1st Training Squadron ITS ships INS Tair and INS Sujata at Kochi as part of a float training with the Indian Navy on 16th of May 2023. The Indian Navy's 6th and final Kalvari class submarine Vakshir has begun its sea trials. Vakshir is scheduled to delivery to the Indian Navy in early 2024 after completion of these trials. The submarine was launched on 20th of April last year from the Kanoji Ankre West Basin of Mazgaon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, MDL. In a statement, the Ministry of Defence said MDL has delivered 3 submarines of the Project 75 in 24 months, and the commencement of sea trials of the 6th submarine is a significant milestone. It said this is indicative of the boost towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. The 32nd Summit of Arab League is currently taking place in Jeddah, with a primary focus on Syria's reinstatement into the League and the ongoing conflict in Sudan. Arab heads of state and government, including Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, have gathered to participate in the meeting, aiming to discuss greater unity and integration to address major crises in the region. The summit coincides with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's active regional diplomacy, mirroring his previous determination in engaging with Iran and regional proxies. At the stock markets, both the Sensex and the Nifty posted gains, but the rupee weakened against the dollar. In the international market, Brent crude futures traded higher. A report from the business desk.
At the stock market, Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange climbed 298 points, 0.5% to close at 61,730 today. Nifty at the National Stock Exchange added 73 points, 0.4% to end at 18,203. In the global bourses, Japan's Nikkei 225 index climbed 0.8%, South Korea's Kospi index advanced 0.9%, and Singapore's Straits Times index gained 0.5%. The China Shanghai Composite Index fell 0.4%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index declined 1.4%. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 had gained 0.4%, France's CAC 40 had climbed 0.8%, and Germany's DAX had added 0.7% in intraday trade. Global crude oil prices traded higher today as investors turned cautiously optimistic over the fading risk of a US debt default. So Brent crude futures rose 69 cents to $76.55 a barrel. US crude futures gained 56 cents to $72.42 a barrel. Back home, gold fell 105 rupees to 60,045 rupees per 10 grams at Delhi's bullion market amid weak global cues. But silver climbed 255 rupees to 73,500 rupees per kilogram. And at the foreign exchange market, the rupee weakened by 6 paise to 82 rupees and 66 paise against the US dollar. Arjun Chaudhary for World News, Akashvani.
In Italian Open tennis, Ukraine's Annalina Kalinina has entered the women's singles final, beating 11th seed Russia's Veronika Kudermetova in the final 7-5, 5-7, 6-2 in Rome a short while ago. Later, reigning Wimbledon champion and 7th seed Elena Rybakina of Kazakhstan will take on former French Open winner Jelena Ostapenko of Latvia in the second semi-final. Men's singles semi-finals will be played on Saturday, while third seed Daniil Medvedev will take on fifth seed Stefanos Tsitsipas of Greece. Fourth seed Casper Ruud of Norway will meet world number 7 Holger Rune of Denmark. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Wall Street Journal reports China puts spy master in charge of US corporate crackdown. The Guardian writes kidnapped Australian Dr. Ken Elliott released by Al-Qaeda in Africa after 7-year fight for freedom. Washington Post reports Arab embrace of Assad underscores divergence with US over Syria. The Japan Times reports NATO revisits Cold War past with first major defense plans in decades. Khabar Hub writes G7 to increase financial pressure on Russia. The Globe and the Mail writes Chinese comedians crack about the military results in $6 million fine, and the Straits Times reports warming world risks adding 9 million deaths annually, WHO warns. Now a quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches Hiroshima in Japan to attend G7 summit. Japan expresses keen interest in joining India's Unified Payments Interface UPI system. India hands over humanitarian assistance and disaster relief material to Cyclone Mocha hit Myanmar. Reserve Bank of India to withdraw 2,000 rupee notes for circulation to remain as legal tender. India says it is developing mitigation programs to reduce risk of losses from all hazards. And in Italian Open tennis, Ukraine's Annalina Kalinina enters women's singles final, beating Russia's Veronika Kudermetova in the final semi-final by 7-5, 5-7, 6-2 in Rome. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Jan, by artists from Denmark.
Vaishnava Jan tu tine kahiye ke peeda parai jaane re par dukhe upakar kare toye man abhiman naane re sakal log na sahune bande ninda na kare kene re baat kaat man nichal rakhe धन धन जननी तेरी रे.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of the World News.